I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the neon orange envelope tucked under my windshield wiper that Tuesday morning in February. Nothing good ever came in those HOA violation notices, and this was going to be my third one in as many months here at Pinewood Estates in Boulder, Colorado. My name is Xavier Carmichael, and I had made the colossal mistake of buying a house in this neighborhood exactly 8 months ago. The place looked perfect during the summer showing, with its manicured lawns and pristine sidewalks. What the realtor conveniently forgot to mention was that the HOA board was run by a woman who could make a drill sergeant look easygoing. I pulled the envelope free and tore it open right there in my driveway. The fine was for $300. $300, because my snow pile was allegedly exceeding the maximum height allowed on residential property, which according to Code Section 12.4-B was not to exceed 4 feet from ground level when measured from the street side. The thing was, we had just gotten hammered by a blizzard. 2 feet of snow had fallen over the weekend, and I had spent 6 hours on Sunday clearing my driveway with my snowblower. I had to put the snow somewhere, and that somewhere was the edge of my property line, exactly where everyone else in the neighborhood put theirs. But apparently, mine was too tall. I stood there in the cold, my breath forming clouds in the morning air, reading and rereading the citation. It was signed by Karen Kensington, the HOA president and the bane of my existence since I moved in. The first fine had been for leaving my trash cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours after pickup. The second had been for having a holiday wreath on my door past January 15th. Now this. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of my snow pile from multiple angles. Then I walked up and down the street, photographing every single neighbor's snow pile. Mr. Henderson 3 houses down had a pile that was easily 6 feet tall. The Johnsons across the street had snow stacked up against their fence that looked like a miniature mountain range. But somehow, I was the only one with a citation. My phone buzzed. It was my buddy Marcus calling. "Hey man, you still coming to the gym?" he asked. "Yeah, but I am so pissed right now you would not believe it," I said, walking back toward my house. "The HOA hit me with another fine. $300 because my snow pile is too tall. You are kidding me. Did you see the pile outside the community center? That thing is massive." "Yeah, but that does not count apparently. Different rules for the HOA property versus residential." "That is such garbage, dude. You should fight it." "I plan to," I said, climbing into my truck. "I am taking this to the next board meeting. I have had it with Karen and her petty power trips." The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at 7. I spent Wednesday evening preparing my case, printing out photos, measuring snow piles with a tape measure like some kind of winter-obsessed detective, and reviewing the HOA bylaws until my eyes hurt. The documents were dense, written in that special kind of legal language designed to confuse normal people. But I found what I needed. According to Section 12.4-B, snow piles could not exceed 4 feet from ground level. But Section 12.4-C stated that during exceptional weather events classified as blizzards by the National Weather Service, temporary exceptions could be granted for up to 72 hours after the storm ended. The blizzard had ended Sunday morning. Today was Wednesday. I was well within my rights. Thursday evening came, and I walked into the community center conference room with a folder full of evidence and a head full of righteous anger. The room was set up with a long table at the front where the 5 board members sat, and several rows of chairs for residents. About 15 people were scattered throughout the seats. Karen Kensington sat front and center, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun that seemed to pull her whole face taut. She was probably in her early 50s, thin and angular, wearing a crisp white blouse and too much jewelry. To her left was Dale Murphy, the vice president, a soft-spoken accountant who mostly nodded along with whatever Karen said. To her right was Patricia Wung, the treasurer, who at least seemed reasonable most of the time. The other two board members, Frank Delgado and Susan Mitchell, completed the panel. "Good evening, everyone," Karen said, her voice sharp and nasal. "Let us call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda is approval of last month's minutes." I sat through 20 minutes of tedious administrative business, my leg bouncing impatiently. Finally, we reached the public comment section. "Does anyone have any concerns to bring before the board?" Karen asked, looking around the room with an expression that clearly said she hoped no one did. I stood up. "I do." Her eyes narrowed when she saw me. "Mr. Carmichael, of course. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less." I walked to the front of the room and placed my folder on the podium someone had set up. "I received a citation this week for having a snow pile that exceeded 4 feet in height. I am here to formally dispute this fine on several grounds." "The citation was issued because you were in clear violation of the code," Karen interrupted. "If I could finish," I said, keeping my voice level. "First, I measured my snow pile. At its highest point, it is 3 feet and 10 inches. Here are photos with a tape measure clearly visible." I held up the first set of photos. Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Our measurements were taken from the street side, where runoff is a concern. The code does not specify street side. It says ground level. But even if we use your interpretation, I still measured from the street, 3 feet 10 inches. Second, I have photos of at least 6 other properties with snow piles significantly taller than mine, none of which received citations." "We issue citations as violations are observed," Dale said quietly. "Observed by whom?" "Because I find it interesting that I have been cited 3 times in 3 months, while other clear violations go unnoticed." I pulled out more photos. "This is Mr. Henderson's property. This pile is over 6 feet tall. This is the Johnson residence, also over 4 feet. This is the Martinez house. This one is practically blocking the sidewalk." Patricia leaned forward to look at the photos. "Those do appear to be in violation." Karen shot her a look. "We will conduct a neighborhood survey and issue appropriate citations. That does not negate Mr. Carmichael's violation." "Actually, it does," I said, pulling out my trump card. "Because Section 12.4-C provides an exception for exceptional weather events." The National Weather Service classified last weekend's storm as a blizzard. The exception period is 72 hours. I was cited on Tuesday morning, which was only 48 hours after the storm ended Sunday morning. I was within my rights to have a temporary pile of any height during that period. The room went silent. I saw Patricia and Frank exchange glances. Even Dale looked uncomfortable. Karen's face had gone red. The spirit of the code is to maintain property values and aesthetic standards. "The letter of the code is what matters in a legal dispute," I said, "which this will become if this fine is not rescinded. I am formally requesting that the board vote to remove this citation and refund any processed payments." "We will take your objection under advisement," Karen said icily. "I am requesting a vote tonight." "That is not how this works, Mr. Carmichael. Actually, according to the bylaws, any resident can request an immediate vote on a matter directly affecting them if they provide sufficient evidence of improper citation. I have done that." Article 6, Section 3. I had stayed up until 2 in the morning finding that particular clause. The look on Karen's face made every minute worth it. Patricia cleared her throat. "He is correct. We need to vote." Karen looked like she had bitten into a lemon. Fine. All in favor of rescinding the citation. Patricia raised her hand immediately. Frank raised his after a moment. Susan looked at Karen, then at me, then reluctantly raised her hand. Motion carries, Patricia said. The citation is rescinded. Thank you, I said, gathering my folder. I appreciate the board's time. I walked out of that community center feeling like I had just won the Super Bowl. Several residents stopped me in the parking lot to congratulate me. One older man named George Patterson told me he had been fighting with the HOA for 2 years over a fence height issue, and asked if I could look at his case. The feeling of victory lasted exactly 4 days. Monday morning, I woke up to find another orange envelope. This time it was taped to my front door. Inside was a citation for $350. The violation was listed as unsightly snow pile creating drainage concerns and impeding neighborhood aesthetics. They had literally made up a new violation category. I checked the HOA codes. There was no such category. They had apparently created it over the weekend specifically to target me. I called Patricia Wung directly. I had gotten her number from George, who said she was the only reasonable person on the board. Patricia, this is Xavier Carmichael. I just received another citation, and the violation category does not even exist in the bylaws. She sighed heavily. I know. Karen called an emergency board meeting on Saturday. She pushed through an amendment to the codes. It passed 3-2. Frank and I voted against it. She cannot do that. Does that not require a vote from the full membership? Minor amendments can be approved by board majority. It is a gray area in the bylaws. Xavier, I am sorry, but I have to be honest with you. Karen has decided you are a problem resident, and she is not going to stop. She has done this before with people who challenge her authority. What happened to them? Most of them sold their houses and moved. One family fought for 18 months and spent over $10,000 in legal fees before finally giving up. The HOA has a legal fund specifically for these disputes, funded by resident dues. She can drag this out forever. I thanked Patricia and hung up, feeling my brief victory curdling into something darker. I looked out my window at the snow pile that had caused all this trouble. It had actually melted down quite a bit in the past few days. It was maybe 2 feet tall now, and I was being fined $350 for it. That is when I noticed something. From my window, I could see the community tennis courts about a quarter-mile away. They were closed for the winter, covered in snow, completely unused until spring. And sitting next to them was the largest pile of snow I had ever seen outside of a ski resort. When the HOA cleared the community center parking lot and the main roads through the neighborhood, they piled all the snow in one location, right next to those tennis courts. The pile was easily 20 feet tall, maybe 30 feet wide, and stretched for probably 50 yards. It was a mountain of snow, and nobody was citing the HOA for it. An idea began forming in my mind. A terrible, petty, probably stupid idea. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense in that special way that revenge plans make sense when you are angry enough to ignore all the obvious problems. I called Marcus. Hey, are you busy tonight? Depends. What are you planning? How would you like to help me move some snow? There was a pause. I feel like there is a story here. I explained the situation, the fines, the made-up violation, and my plan. Marcus started laughing. Dude, that is insane. I love it. Count me in. But we are going to need more than just us. That is a lot of snow to move. I know. I am thinking we start around midnight, work until dawn. Can you grab your brother and maybe 1 or 2 other guys? For this? Absolutely. This is the most entertainment I have had all winter. I spent the rest of the day planning. I had a pickup truck with a bed liner, Marcus had a truck too. His brother Jeremy had a trailer. Between the 3 vehicles and maybe 6 guys with shovels, we could move a significant amount of snow in 5 or 6 hours. The weather forecast showed clear skies and temperatures in the low 20s. Cold enough to keep the snow from getting too sloppy, but not so cold we would freeze. It was perfect. At 11 that night, I met Marcus, Jeremy, and 3 of their friends from their construction company at the corner store about a mile from my neighborhood. I bought everyone coffee and energy drinks. We looked like we were about to commit a heist, which I suppose in a way we were. "So let me get this straight," said a guy named Tony. "We are stealing snow from your property and dumping it on tennis courts, not stealing, relocating. And technically, I am solving my violation problem. They said my pile was unsightly and causing drainage concerns. Well, if there is no pile, there is no violation." "I like how you think," Tony said. "Plus, screw HOAs. My parents dealt with one for years. Power-tripping nightmares, all of them." We caravaned back to my house. The neighborhood was dead quiet, every house dark. We worked quickly, loading snow into the truck beds and trailer using shovels. The pile had compacted from the sun during the day, making it heavy and dense. It was back-breaking work, even with 6 of us. "This is definitely the most illegal thing I have done in a while," Jeremy said, tossing another shovelful into his trailer. "It is not illegal," I said. "It is snow, public property once it falls from the sky. I do not think that is how it works, but I am not a lawyer." The first load was ready around 12:30. We drove through the neighborhood with our lights off, which in hindsight was probably more suspicious than just driving normally, but paranoia had set in. The tennis courts were at the back of the community, near the maintenance building and the community pool, both locked up for winter. The courts had a fence around them, but the gate was not locked. I guess nobody imagined they needed to secure tennis courts in February. We backed the trucks up to the gate and started shoveling snow onto the courts. "Where exactly do you want this?" Marcus asked. "Everywhere, all of it. Make it even." We spread the first load across both courts, a thin layer of white covering the green surface. Then we went back for more. And more. And more. By 3 in the morning, we had made serious progress. My snow pile was now completely gone, my driveway and lawn looking cleaner than they had since before the blizzard. The tennis courts, on the other hand, were starting to look like an Arctic wasteland. We had piled snow at least 4 feet deep across both courts, maybe deeper in some spots where we had just dumped full loads. "How much more do you want to do?" Jeremy asked, leaning on his shovel and breathing hard. "I am thinking we should grab snow from some other spots. Make it really dramatic." "You are insane," Tony said, "but I respect it." We spent another hour collecting snow from the edges of my property, from the street where the plow had left piles, even from my backyard. We took every last bit of snow we could find and transported it to those tennis courts. By 4:30 in the morning, we were exhausted, soaked with sweat despite the cold, and looking at our handiwork. The tennis courts were buried under what had to be several tons of snow. You could not even see the nets anymore. It looked like a professional snow removal company had used the courts as a dumping ground. "This is beautiful," Marcus said. "Like art. Angry, petty art." "What do you think Karen is going to say when she sees this?" Jeremy asked. "I have no idea," I said, "but I cannot wait to find out." We packed up the trucks and headed out. I thanked everyone profusely, promising beer and pizza in the near future. Then I went home, took the hottest shower of my life, and collapsed into bed. I woke up around 9 to my phone ringing nonstop. 17 missed calls, 12 text messages, 3 voicemails, all from numbers I did not recognize, plus several from Patricia Wung. I listened to Patricia's voicemail first. "Xavier, I do not know if you had anything to do with the tennis courts, but Karen is absolutely losing her mind. She is threatening to call the police. Call me back. The police. I felt my stomach drop. In my sleep-deprived, revenge-fueled state last night, I had not seriously considered legal consequences. What law had I actually broken? Trespassing, maybe. Vandalism. Was moving snow onto tennis courts vandalism? I called Patricia back. What exactly is she saying? I asked. She is saying someone deliberately vandalized HOA property by dumping snow on the tennis courts. She thinks it was you, but she does not have any proof. Xavier, I have to ask, was it you? Hypothetically, if someone had removed an unsightly snow pile from their property by relocating it to an already snow-covered area that was not in use, would that be illegal? Patricia was quiet for a moment. I am not a lawyer, but I think you might have a problem if she can prove it was you. She is talking about filing a police report and suing for damages. Damages? It is snow. It will melt. The courts need to be professionally cleaned now before spring. That is going to cost money, and she is claiming this was intentional destruction of property. I thanked Patricia and hung up, my brief surge of satisfaction from the night before evaporating. I had not thought this through. I had been so focused on getting back at Karen that I had not considered the actual consequences. My doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 Boulder police officers standing on my porch. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Good morning, officers. How can I help you?" The older cop, whose name tag read Officer Morrison, spoke first. "Good morning, sir. Are you Xavier Carmichael?" "I am." "We received a report about vandalism to HOA property. Tennis courts were allegedly buried in snow overnight. The HOA president seems to think you might know something about it." "Why would she think that?" "She mentioned you have had recent disputes with the HOA. Also, your snow pile from your property is now completely gone. She says it was there yesterday." I chose my words carefully. "I cleared my snow pile yesterday evening because I received a citation about it. I removed it from my property." "Where did you put it?" the younger officer asked. "I am not sure I am required to answer that without a lawyer present, am I?" Officer Morrison sighed. "Look, Mr. Carmichael, we are not trying to jam you up here. But between you and me, if you dumped a bunch of snow on those tennis courts, that could be considered criminal mischief or trespassing. Small charges, but still charges. If you cooperate now, this all goes much easier." "I would like to speak to a lawyer before I answer any questions," I said. They gave me a card with a case number and left. I immediately called my old college roommate Derek, who had become a lawyer in Denver. He specialized in corporate law, not criminal defense, but he could at least point me in the right direction. "You did what?" Derek asked after I explained the situation. "I moved snow from my property to unused tennis courts. At midnight, without permission. Xavier, that is trespassing at minimum, possibly criminal mischief. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking the HOA was harassing me with made-up fines and I wanted to prove a point." "Well, you proved something, all right. Look, I can recommend a good criminal defense attorney, but this might not go that far. Let me make some calls. In the meantime, do not talk to anyone about this. Not the police, not the HOA, not your neighbors, nobody." I spent the rest of the day in a state of anxious limbo. I could not focus on work. I kept checking my phone. Around 3 in the afternoon, Derek called back. "Okay, here is the deal. I talked to a buddy of mine who does defense work. He says if the HOA wants to push this, they could probably get you on misdemeanor charges. But here is the thing. He also says you might have a civil case against the HOA for harassment." "Really?" "Yeah. The pattern of citations, the made-up violation category, the selective enforcement. If you can prove targeted harassment, you could potentially sue them. And if you sue them, they are going to think twice about pushing criminal charges because it opens them up to discovery. All their documents, emails, meeting minutes, everything becomes fair game. So what do I do? My buddy says he will take your case. His name is Robert Chen. He is going to send a letter to the HOA and to the police explaining that you are prepared to file a civil suit for harassment if they pursue charges. It is basically mutually assured destruction. They back off, you back off. And if they do not back off, then we fight, and it gets expensive and messy for everyone. But based on what you told me about this Karen woman, she sounds like a bully, and bullies usually back down when someone punches back. Robert Chen sent his letter on Friday morning. By Friday evening, I got a call from Patricia Wung again. The board met this afternoon, she said. Karen wanted to push forward with charges and a civil suit against you. Frank, Susan, and I voted against it. We are not pursuing this any further. What about the tennis courts? We are having them cleared next week. Karen wanted to send you a bill, but we voted that down too. Xavier, I think you should know. Karen tried to get me removed from the board today for not supporting her. She failed, but this is getting ugly. I am sorry, Patricia. I did not mean to cause problems for you. You did not cause anything. Karen has been a problem for years. Maybe this will finally make people pay attention. There is going to be an election for board seats in 3 months. I am encouraging several residents to run against her. Over the next few weeks, things in Pinewood Estates started to change. George Patterson, the old man with the fence dispute, filed a formal complaint against Karen with the state HOA Oversight Board. 2 other families came forward with similar stories of harassment and targeted fines. Someone created a Facebook group called Pinewood Estates Residents Coalition, and within a week, it had over 200 members sharing their Karen Kensington horror stories. The tennis courts were cleared, though it took 3 days and a professional crew with heavy equipment. I watched from a distance, feeling a mix of satisfaction and guilt. The satisfaction won. In March, when the snow had finally started to melt for good, the HOA held its annual meeting and board elections. Over 400 residents showed up, more than triple the usual attendance. Karen ran for re-election as president. She lost to Frank Delgado by a landslide. Patricia remained as treasurer. 2 new members joined the board, including George Patterson. One of their first acts was to vote to repeal the unsightly snow pile violation category that Karen had created. They also passed new rules requiring board approval from at least 4 members before any new violation categories could be added, and requiring that all citations be reviewed by 2 board members before being issued. Karen attended one meeting after losing her position, sitting in the audience with her arms crossed, glaring at everyone. Then she stopped coming entirely. I heard from neighbors that she had put her house up for sale. In April, I got a letter in the mail. Not an orange envelope this time, just a regular white one with the HOA logo. Inside was a formal apology from the new board, a refund check for the original $300 fine I had paid before fighting back, and a notification that my HOA dues for the next year were being waived as additional compensation for the harassment. I took Marcus, Jeremy, and the other guys out for that beer and pizza I had promised. We sat around a table at a sports bar in downtown Boulder, laughing about the great tennis court snow caper. "You know what the funny part is?" Marcus said. "You could have just paid the fine and moved on. It would have been way less stressful." Yeah, but then Karen would still be running that HOA into the ground. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when it is scary. Even when it involves moving several tons of snow in the middle of the night, especially then. Tony raised his beer. To Xavier, who took down an HOA president with nothing but snow and spite. And friends willing to commit minor crimes with me, I added. Minor crimes is our specialty, Jeremy said. We clinked glasses and drank to small victories and neighborhood justice. The next morning, I got a call from a reporter at the Boulder Daily Camera. Somehow, word had gotten out about the tennis court incident and the HOA shakeup. She wanted to do a story about HOA reform and residents fighting back against overreach. I agreed to an interview, though I was careful not to explicitly admit to the snow dumping. The story ran the following week with the headline "Pinewood Estates Residents Overthrow Controversial HOA Leadership." It detailed years of complaints against Karen's administration, the election results, and the new board's reform efforts. There was one paragraph about tennis courts mysteriously being covered in snow, described as an incident that residents found humorous but board leadership at the time did not. The story got picked up by local news stations. A Denver TV reporter came out and did a segment on HOA reform legislation being considered by the state legislature. They interviewed me, George, Patricia, and several other residents. Karen declined to comment. In May, I was working in my garage on a Saturday afternoon when a car pulled up. A woman in her 30s got out, looking nervous. "Are you Xavier Carmichael?" she asked. "I am. My name is Jennifer Martinez. I live over in Lakeside Meadows. I read about what happened with your HOA. I am having similar problems with ours, and I was wondering if you could give me some advice." I invited her to sit on my porch and she told me her story. It was depressingly familiar. A power-hungry board president, arbitrary fines, selective enforcement. She had been fighting for months and was close to giving up. I told her everything I had learned. Document everything. Take photos. Know the bylaws better than the board does. Find allies among other residents. And most importantly, do not be afraid to fight back, even when it seems hopeless. The thing about bullies, I said, is that they are used to people rolling over. The moment you stand up, really stand up, they do not know what to do. They expected me to just pay the fines and shut up. When I did not, their whole system fell apart. Jennifer left with a notebook full of advice and a renewed sense of determination. Over the next few months, I heard from 6 more people in similar situations. I started a blog sharing what I had learned about fighting HOA overreach. It was not anything fancy, just practical advice and stories from my experience. By summer, Pinewood Estates had transformed. The new board was actually responsive to resident concerns. They held regular town halls. They created committees to review proposed rule changes. People started talking to their neighbors again instead of living in fear of citations. I ran into Patricia at the grocery store in June. She thanked me for everything. "You know, for a while there, I was ready to move," she said. "I have lived here for 12 years, but dealing with Karen was exhausting. You gave a lot of us the courage to finally do something about it." "I just moved some snow," I said. "Everyone else did the real work. You did more than that. You showed us we did not have to accept the way things were." In July, I got one final piece of mail from the HOA. Karen Kensington had officially sold her house and moved out of state. The new owner was a young couple with a baby. I saw them moving in and walked over to introduce myself. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said. "You are going to like it here." "The HOA is actually pretty reasonable now," the husband laughed. "That is good to hear." The realtor mentioned something about recent changes in management, said there had been some drama, a little bit, but it all worked out. That evening I sat on my back porch with a beer, watching the sun set over the mountains. My lawn was green and neat, no snow piles to worry about, no orange envelopes under my windshield, just a quiet neighborhood evening. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus. "Hey, did you see the news?" "What news?" "Check the Boulder police reports. Someone dumped a bunch of trash on an HOA president's driveway over in Sunset Hills. Police are investigating. Think we started a trend." "That was not us," I said firmly. "And we did not dump trash. We relocated snow to an appropriate winter storage location." Marcus laughed. "Whatever helps you sleep at night, man. Hey, couple of us are going hiking tomorrow. You in?" "Yeah, I am in." I hung up and finished my beer. The truth was, what I had done was petty, probably illegal, and definitely not the mature way to handle a dispute, but it worked. And sometimes, when you are dealing with someone who only understands power, you have to speak their language. Would I recommend my approach to others? Probably not. There were plenty of moments where it could have gone very wrong. If the police had pushed charges, if the HOA had been more competent in their response, if I had not had good legal advice, things could have ended badly. But in this case, in this situation, with this particular tyrant, a few tons of snow on some tennis courts was exactly the message that needed sending. The following fall, I was elected to the HOA board. It was not something I had planned to do, but several neighbors nominated me, and I figured I might as well help make sure the reform stuck. Our first meeting was held at the community center, in the same room where I had fought my first citation. Frank, as president, opened the meeting. "First order of business is reviewing our snow removal policy for the upcoming winter season. Xavier, since you have some experience with snow management, would you like to weigh in?" The room erupted in laughter. Even Frank was grinning. "I think our current policy is fine," I said. "But maybe we should clarify the language around acceptable snow pile heights during exceptional weather events. You know, just to avoid any confusion." "Good idea," Patricia said, winking at me. "We would not want anyone to face unjust citations, or be forced to find creative solutions to those citations," George added. More laughter. It felt good, being able to joke about something that had been so stressful just months earlier. We got through the rest of the meeting efficiently, approving the budget, discussing road repairs, planning community events. Afterwards, as people were leaving, a newer resident named Tom stopped me. "I heard the stories about what you did," he said quietly. "About the tennis courts. I just wanted to say thank you. My last neighborhood had an HOA that made my life miserable for 3 years. I sold at a loss just to get away from it. When I was looking at houses here, I almost passed because of the HOA. But then I heard about the changes, about residents actually having a voice. So thank you. You probably saved this neighborhood for a lot of people." I shook his hand. "We all did it together. I just moved some snow." "You did more than that, and you know it." Winter came again. This time, when the first big storm hit in December, I cleared my driveway and piled the snow neatly at the edge of my property. No orange envelope appeared. No citations. No drama. Just snow being snow and neighbors helping neighbors. I saw several people out with snowblowers, clearing sidewalks for elderly residents. Someone organized a snow shoveling crew for anyone who needed help. The community center parking lot was cleared, and the snow was piled, like always, next to the tennis courts. But this time, someone had put up a sign joking about it being the official snow storage facility. On Christmas Eve, the HOA organized a neighborhood party at the community center. Someone brought a karaoke machine. Someone else made way too much food. Kids ran around playing games while adults stood in groups talking and laughing. Frank made a short speech thanking everyone for making Pinewood Estates a real community again. A year ago, people were afraid to talk to their neighbors for fear of being reported for violations. Now look at us. This is what an HOA should be. Neighbors helping neighbors, not rules for the sake of rules. People clapped. I stood in the back sipping hot chocolate, watching people enjoy themselves. Patricia came up beside me. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "The tennis courts," I thought about it. No. Should I? Probably not. It was reckless and illegal and ridiculous. It was also exactly what needed to happen. Sometimes the system does not fix itself. Sometimes it needs a push. A push with several tons of snow. Whatever it takes. She raised her cup to mine and we toasted. To ridiculous solutions to ridiculous problems. To standing up to bullies. To neighborhood solidarity and snow piled exactly where it belongs. I never saw or heard from Karen Kensington again. I looked her up once out of curiosity and found she had moved to Arizona. Good riddance. Some people are meant to live in HOA-controlled communities with strict rules and harsh enforcement. I hope she found one that made her happy, or at least kept her busy enough to leave everyone else alone. As for me, I learned valuable lessons that year. I learned that documentation is everything, that knowing the rules better than your opponent is crucial, and that sometimes the most absurd action is the most effective one. I learned that communities are stronger when people work together instead of living in fear. And I learned that I was apparently the kind of person who would spend an entire night moving snow to prove a point, which said something about my character that I was still processing. The blog I started continued to grow. I got messages from people across the country dealing with HOA nightmares. Some situations I could help with. Others were too entrenched, too complicated, or involved HOAs that were actually following reasonable rules. Not every HOA is evil. Some are well-run organizations that genuinely improve neighborhoods. But when they go bad, they go really bad, and the power imbalance makes fighting back incredibly difficult. I started compiling resources on the blog. Links to state HOA regulations, template letters for disputing citations, advice on running for board positions, contact information for lawyers who specialized in HOA disputes. It became a small resource hub for people who felt powerless against their associations. In February, exactly 1 year after the infamous tennis court incident, someone on the neighborhood Facebook page suggested we celebrate the anniversary. I thought they were joking. They were not. They wanted to throw a party. "We can call it the snowball," someone suggested. "That is terrible," I wrote back. "I love it." We held it at the community center on a Saturday night. Someone made a cake decorated with a tennis court covered in snow. Someone else created a trophy, an actual cheap plastic trophy from a sporting goods store, with a plaque that read Pinewood Estates Snow Removal Champion. They presented it to me in a mock ceremony while everyone laughed and clapped. It was absurd and wonderful, and everything I never knew I wanted from a neighborhood. These were my people now. We had been through something together, fought against the same petty tyranny, and come out better for it. Marcus showed up to the party with Jeremy and the other guys who had helped that night. They became neighborhood legends in their own right. People bought them drinks and asked them about the operation like it was a military raid. They ate up the attention. "Next time you need something moved in the middle of the night, you know who to call," Tony said, clearly enjoying his moment of fame. "There better not be a next time," I said. "I am reformed, strictly law-abiding now." "Until the next Karen comes along," Marcus said. "Then we will handle it the boring way, through proper channels and legal procedures." That does not sound nearly as fun. He was right. It was not as fun, but it was safer and saner and less likely to result in police showing up at my door. Personal growth, I suppose. I stayed on the HOA board for 2 years. We continued making changes, streamlining rules, reducing fees where possible, and generally trying to make the organization less invasive and more helpful. It was not glamorous work, mostly reviewing budgets and coordinating maintenance, but it mattered. Eventually, I stepped down to focus on my actual job and my actual life. New people took over, good people who cared about the community. The reforms held. The neighborhood thrived. I still live in Pinewood Estates. My house is worth more now than when I bought it, partly because of market conditions, but also because the neighborhood is desirable again. People want to live in places where they feel respected and heard, not monitored and controlled. Sometimes, late at night when I cannot sleep, I drive past the tennis courts. They are busy in summer now, people actually using them. Kids taking lessons. Adults playing doubles. In winter, they sit quiet under snow, just another part of the landscape. I think about that night sometimes, about the cold and the darkness and the exhausted satisfaction of spreading snow across green courts. I think about Karen and her orange envelopes and her petty tyranny. I think about how close I came to just giving up and paying the fines and letting her win. But I did not. I fought back in the most ridiculous way possible, and somehow, impossibly, it worked. It sparked something bigger than just my small act of revenge. It showed other people that they did not have to accept things as they were. It created change. Was it the right way to handle the situation? Probably not. Would I recommend it to others? Definitely not. Would I do it again if I had to? Absolutely. Because sometimes, when every reasonable option has been exhausted and you are facing down a bully who only understands power, the most unreasonable option is the only one that works. Sometimes you have to move mountains, or at least move mountains of snow onto tennis courts to prove a point. And sometimes, late on a Tuesday night in February, when the world is quiet and cold and covered in white, the most radical act is simply refusing to accept injustice, even when that injustice comes on orange paper with official letterhead and threatens $300 fines. That is my story. The story of how an HOA fine for snow piled too high led to several tons of snow on tennis courts, a neighborhood revolution, and a plastic trophy I keep on my mantle to this day. It is not a story about heroism or grand gestures. It is a story about being fed up enough to do something stupid, lucky enough to have it work out, and smart enough to learn from it. The tennis courts are still there. The snow still falls every winter. The HOA still sends out communications about policies and procedures. But now they are reasonable. Now they are fair. Now they remember what happened the last time they were not, and if they ever forget, well, I still have a snowblower and several friends with trucks, but I really hope it never comes to that again. Once was enough for a lifetime. Once was perfect.